Until Thursday, Majority Leader Mitch McConnell urging some level of compromise.
The president, from whom we will need a signature, and Senate Democrats, from whom we will need votes, reach an agreement. No procedural votes, no test votes, just a meaningful vote on a bipartisan agreement whenever that is reached. And it's my hope that it's reached sooner rather than later.
Our Ellison Barber is at the White House tracking all of this. And Ellison, is the White House still saying they must have that $5 billion for border security or no deal?
Well, they've come down from that number a little bit. We've repeatedly heard the White House say, they've been saying it all weekend, that they need $5 billion for border security and some sort of physical barrier. A senior administration official briefed reporters on Saturday and said that that was what they expected from Congress. But of course, things move pretty fast around here. And with 24 hours of that official briefing, reporters, Vice President Mike Pence and Budget Director Mick Mulvaney were on their way to Capitol Hill to meet with Democratic Senator Chuck Schumer and give him a counter offer. The White House says that offer is somewhere between $1.3 billion and $5 billion.
The ball is in the Senate's court. Of course, keep in mind, any bill that comes out of the Senate on this topic will have to have 60 votes, so they'll have to have Democrat support. They are at 1.3 yesterday. We were at $5 billion a couple of days ago. We moved off of the 5. We hope they move up from their 1.3.
A Democratic source tells Fox News the latest offer from the White House is $2.1 billion for border security, and that includes new fencing plus $400 million for other immigration priorities. Mulvaney says it is possible that this shutdown will go into the new year. Anita?
Okay, and when the White House says they want a physical barrier, we've seen the president tweet out photos of sort of something with slats. Is that more amenable to the Democrats? Do you think they might go for something like that?
Yeah, well, we've heard back and forth this idea that really everything is a game of semantics when it comes to this particular fight, that the White House, the president says he needs a wall, that Democrats don't want a wall, but now the White House says it's really more so a steel slat barrier. They're calling it a fence, a physical barrier. The president tweeted this photo last week, and the White House describes it as a steel slatted fence. They say this is what they want to build, and that they have told the Democrats this is exactly what they want to build. The White House claims that Democrats have supported this sort of thing in the past with the Secure Fence Act, that at best they are playing a game of semantics and saying they won't agree to a wall, but don't consider the steel slats to be a, quote, wall at worst. The White House says this is all about politics for Democrats. The president tweeting this morning, quote, virtually every Democrat we are dealing with today strongly supported a border wall or fence. It was only when I made it an important part of my campaign because people and drugs were pouring into our country unchecked that they turned against it. Desperately needed. Democrats, of course, say this is all about politics for the president and that he is throwing a temper tantrum and playing politics at the taxpayers' expense.
If you don't fix it, we're going to send Anthony Scaramucci out there to do the job.
By the way, he's here.
It'll take me less than 11 days, but I'll break that thing up for you. Go ahead.
All right, so Anthony, of course, your book is still out, and it is Trump, the blue-collar president, and that really personifies why he's successful, why it resonates with so many working class and so many in the middle America. But let's talk about some of the messaging coming out of the White House.
Sure.
They see what's happening with the markets. They see what's happening with Mattis. They see what's happening with the trade deals, and they think it's chaos. Is it?
It's not chaos. It's basically the president is probably one of the few people that's willing to play a long game as opposed to all these little blips and ticks in the market. Long game on trade, long game on Middle East strategy. I mean, one of the reasons why he's pulling out, you saw it right here. He doesn't want to put these people in harm's way unnecessarily. In his opinion, he's decimated ISIS, and it's time to pass the baton on to people in the region to secure the rest of the
They have
situation.
different objectives. That's the problem.
Yeah, I understand that, but here's the thing. You know, we can't be everything to everybody, Brian, and so I think the president recognizes that. And you know, you're spending $1 trillion of debt. And I'm with the president on this. I'm with Rand Paul and the president on this. And you know, people are upset with me because it's outside of the neocon and it's outside of the traditional Republican stuff. But I've been to these places. You know, I've been to Afghanistan. I've been to Iraq. I'm not saying that we have to have a complete withdrawal, but I totally understand where the president's coming from. And I wrote a piece in the Atlantic Council on Friday as to why adventurism and this whole neocon strategy has been not that successful.
Let's talk about one thing, though, and Brian raised this a little bit, and that is the military. This is what the media is really focusing on, is the fact that the president's not listening to the military advisors. I think General Mattis has an unquestioned and perhaps unparalleled experience. He took us into Afghanistan, and then he took us into Iraq, and he says stay.
I have an enormous amount of respect for General Mattis. There's no question about that. But I also recognize where the president's going and where the intersection needs to be. He's going to leave levels of troops in Afghanistan. You know, we have way more troops in Iraq. We scaled it down. That was an incorrect decision by the Obama administration. Had to be scaled back up. But, you know, we were supposed to be in Syria for a few months, and now it's been 3 years, and it's this drag. And I'll point out that what John F. Kennedy once said, you know, you have to be very careful. We have a military industrial complex that's established, and you know, the impulse is to fight. But sometimes the better impulse is not to fight. Think of what John Kennedy did in those cabinet meetings during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Curtis LeMay wanted to wipe out Cuba. Kennedy asked him, how big would the casualties be? 150 million people. He looked over at his brother and says, "Didn't they call this a human race?" And so I really admire and respect the president having some restraint.
But
all of those impulses.
Just so you know, Anthony, we've lost 3 guys in 3 years. 3 too many, I get it. But they're supporting and killing terrorists. They're trying to kill us here, especially as a New Yorker.
I understand the situation with the Kurds. You know, you and I may disagree on this. You know, I respect you immensely. But here's the problem. When you're in that decision and you're the commander-in-chief and you're looking at the entire landscape of what you need to do and you're looking at our resources, the president's done a very good job of, in my opinion, playing the long game. And so, you know, the market is a little haywire right now. It's a little uncertain about trade. There's algo trading in there. I think the market's at a bottom. I'm running $11.5 billion, and hopefully you'll invite me back in a few weeks. You'll see the market start to rally.
And let's stay on that, because Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, was calling around U.S. banks trying to reassure them everything is okay. So what is the state of the economy today?
So now
and is the administration nervous about it?
Okay, so now everybody's criticizing Stephen for doing that. And so if he didn't do that, people would be criticizing him for not doing it. But the truth of the matter is, it's a totally appropriate thing for him to do, to call around to the banks because of what happened in 2008. The best thing about the United States, though, is we restructured our banks and we strengthened the balance sheet of those banks. Look at what's going on in the European banking system. And by the way, no one talks about this, but look at the devastation taking place in China. That stock market's down 35%. The currency's getting crushed. What the president has basically shown people is that the United States, with 25% of the GDP, is still in control of the global economy. He would just like fairness in trade. He's not looking for anything aggressive. He's just saying, hey, your tariffs are up here, ours are down here, move yours down, or we're going to move ours up. So I don't understand why that is such a big deal
I think it's
to all of these people. He's playing a long game, and so it's upsetting the markets temporarily. But you got to give this guy credit for seeing this thing out for 1, 2, 3, 5 years.
Whether it's
He's trying to adjust a 45, 50-year trade imbalance.
Whether it's trade or what's going on in Syria, yesterday Governor Chris Christie, you know him, was on the Sunday shows, and he says this whole style of governing, no one should have been surprised. Take a quick listen to this.
What they voted for was Washington to be upended. They hate Washington, D.C.
That certainly happened.
Right? But John, that's my point. You know, this hysteria about, oh, I've never seen chaos like this. This is what the American people voted for. They said that the way Washington was being run by both parties was not effective, and they wanted a disruptor, and now they've got a disruptor. Now, you know, people may decide they don't like this much disruption, but don't tell me this is not what people expected. People who voted for him, and if you talk to people who are supporters of him, they like this.
Anthony, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I would just add 2 paragraphs to what the governor just said. The president's policies, by and large, step back, are all common sense related. They're actually quite moderate. There's nothing too aggressive about it. He would like border security. The Democrats have now used the wall as a symbol to defeat the president. In the meantime, they used to be for border security. Now, all of a sudden, they're not for border security. The president is about using the military to do strategic things to secure national security and peace for the United States. He's a pretty moderate, common sense-oriented guy. The president's about right-sizing the trade deals. So these guys in Washington hate his guts for a reason. Right. He's not from them, and he cannot be bought.
I have a prediction.
Okay, and you know what? You know what? Good for him. Merry Christmas, Mr. President. Thank God we got you in there.
Within 90 days, he pulls off that China deal. Yeah. You're going to see the market boom in a way in which no one can predict.
Not only the right way. By the way, the market is at a bottom, so you'll remember I said that, okay? Because I look at all those technicals and fundamentals. I may have not been the best White House communications director, but let me tell you something, okay? I've been running money for 30 years, and the market has been oversold by all these technical algorithms, and Steven Mnuchin is doing the right thing by letting everybody know that we're liquid, and there's no reason to overly panic here.
Right.
I expect the market to rally off of it.
Thank you. That's going to be
for
Christmas.
Yeah, your passbook saying this guy is so loaded, you have no idea. Okay? And the rest of these people know he's a little bit of a miser like Scrooge.
We always compare hedge funds in the break.
With the code BECKCHRISTMAS.
Last night I was watching Levin TV on Blaze TV, and Mark was talking about this on the air a bit. The idea that the president is pulling out of Syria, and everybody found out over Twitter at the Pentagon. Just not the way you want to run a country or a war, and it's wrong. It's just not going to lead to anything good. I have David French on. We wanted to talk a little bit about being deplatformed and social media and what it says about us, et cetera, et cetera. But he's a veteran of Operation Iraqi Freedom, and so I wanted to get his opinion because he has written a lot about ISIS over the years as well. His opinion on us pulling out of Syria and what this means. Welcome to the program, David.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Sure. So your thoughts on what happened yesterday?
It's stunning, and it's a terrible mistake. It's a very dangerous mistake. It's stunning in part because just days ago, the administration had reaffirmed its commitment to our Kurdish allies and to completing the mission of destroying ISIS. And people have to understand, when you talk about ISIS, there's the caliphate. Their attempt to create a nation state that has been the caliphate has been largely wiped out. But ISIS, the terrorist organization, still exists. And to put this into perspective, in 2011, when Obama wrongly pulled out of Iraq, this is something that conservatives were deeply concerned about when he did it. And when he wrongly left Iraq, there were only about 700 members of al-Qaeda in Iraq left in that country, only about 700. The best estimate of the remaining strength of ISIS in Iraq and Syria is between 20 and 30,000. And so to say that it's done, that the job is done, is just not factually correct. It is wrong.
We knew this in World War II. I mean, when the regime collapsed in Germany, we didn't stop. We went werewolf hunting. We went looking for those that were called werewolves, self-described werewolves, that were the Nazi believers that went back into the communities and were not going to let this thing die. We knew we had to kill them and stop them.
Well, this would be about declaring the end of the Afghan war right after the Taliban fell, even though we knew that al-Qaeda was still out there. The capital cities of the caliphate have fallen, and Trump deserves a lot of credit for continuing that military campaign and stepping up that military campaign that began under Obama. But now to pull out before that job is done, and then to make it worse, there are three entities most likely to gain, enemies of the U.S. that are most likely to gain from this: ISIS, of course, Russia, and Iran. This is something that we're going to strengthen our enemies. We're going to betray our allies. And to what purpose? This had been one of the most successful American military interventions since 9/11. I mean, we had, with very light casualties by comparison to other American military interventions, toppled the heart of the caliphate, empowered Kurdish allies, held the line against Russia and Iran, and put ISIS in headlong retreat. And before it's all done, you just leave, and you do it by shocking your own generals. That doesn't make sense.
Why did it happen?
Well, we have to crawl into the mind of Donald Trump. I mean, I think part of, from the beginning, he has expressed deep skepticism about America's military actions involvement overseas. He has been talked out of on multiple occasions, headlong and precipitous retreats in Afghanistan, in Syria. You just get the feeling that this is what he wants to do, and that he's been repeatedly talked out of it by the people around him. But
so
he's just going to go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Let's talk about something that I think, David, conservatives and all Americans should be very concerned about right now, but I'm going to really be focusing on it in 2019, and that is the silencing of voices and social media. You wrote an article, "Social Media Idealism Collides with Human Nature." I think that headline says it all. Explain that.
Yeah, so essentially what I'm talking about there is the frustration that the social media companies are now feeling with how their platforms are used, and they're clumsy and sometimes censorious attempts to bring their platforms in alignment with their vision. And so what they imagined was, they're going to create these platforms that are going to bring the world together, and not just bring the world together, and transmit and communicate their values. That, you had these Facebook, Twitter, et cetera, executives, almost all of them uniformly progressive, who believe that these platforms would accomplish progressive things in the world. But it turns out when you create a platform, when you create a true marketplace of ideas, you also empower a lot of voices you don't like, and a lot of voices you disagree with. And particularly on Facebook, it's very interesting. If you look at the top publishers on Facebook in the political context, time and again it's conservatives. Mm-hmm. Time and again it's Republicans. Mm-hmm. And that's not what Zuckerberg built Facebook for.
And they have and they've done everything they can to hurt those platforms and to hurt the traffic, trying to, for me, I have 3.2 million Facebook likes and fans and followers. Right. And they want me to pay to be able to reach the people who said, I want the stuff from him. They're doing everything they can to limit the voice. Yeah.
And the problem is they want two things. They want it all, and they can't have it all. So what they want is to reach every person in the world, and then they also want to spread and inculcate a particular set of values. Well, if you make your platform a value transmission device, you're going to limit its reach. And so they keep on trying to square that circle. They keep trying to say, well, we want everybody on there, but we really, truly only want a certain kind of expression on there. You can't have both, but they flail around often trying to have both, or at least trying their best to limit the spread of ideas that they dislike. And this is a real problem. It creates almost an unbearable amount of tension, because on the one hand, you have conservatives saying, hey, treat us equally. Just treat us, we don't need special treatment. Just treat us equally with other perspectives. And then you have progressives who happen to be, in their peer group, essentially, saying, what are you doing? You're all progressives. You want the progressive values spread.
I think you also have a third group of people that are both sides that look at these really hideous things from anti-Semites or whatever, right. And say you got to get rid of them. But the correct answer is I can't get rid of anybody. It's a platform. I can't get rid of anybody.
Well, yeah, I think, and I've been long arguing this, that the correct way to look at this is to not try to reinvent the wheel, but take America's 200 plus years of experience with the First Amendment and apply it to these social media companies, not by force of law. And I don't want Congress saying you have to apply First Amendment principles, but I'd say Twitter and Facebook voluntarily applying First Amendment principles. And core to the First Amendment jurisprudence is the idea of viewpoint neutrality. In other words, if we're a platform, whatever rules we put in place, they're going to be viewpoint neutral rules. We're not going to privilege a point of view and suppress another point of view. We're going to create a marketplace of ideas. And I think that that's the way through this wilderness. But because they have not done that, and because they have put their thumb on the scales, sometimes to get rid of really, truly bad people, no question. But because they have put their thumb on the scales, they're opening themselves to endless charges of double standards.
Yeah.
Because those double standards are very, very real.
And I'm trying to decide Facebook, Google, all social media and these big platforms, YouTube. Are they creating a hostile civilization? Are they just empowering that hostile position, or are they just revealing who we really are?
I think it's revealing and empowering. So I don't think people are people are people. But what Facebook has been able to do, what YouTube has been able to do, is essentially take all of the flaws of human beings, and often all the virtues of human beings as well, but all of the flaws of human beings, and put them right in our face all the time. So that if, let's say you have neighbors who live 5 doors down who have bad ideas about politics, you might not ever encounter them pre-Facebook, pre-Twitter. But now everybody's bad ideas, and by bad ideas, the ones you don't like, are thrown in your face constantly all the time on these platforms. And I think what it does is it sort of takes our natural emotional reaction to being exposed to things we don't like, makes it relentless, and then sort of over time turns it up to 11. And it's the only way to really escape it is to turn off social media entirely. But then you get that sort of nagging feeling that, what am I missing? Am I missing these developments with my grandkids? Am I missing these developments with my friends on the West Coast? So you turn it back on for the friendships, and then there it is again, all of the things that you dislike. And I think it just takes who we actually are and just throws it in our face all the time.